Thanks. It's a privilege to be here to share some ideas about political entrepreneurship with you. It's an interesting concept, political entrepreneurship. I taught for many, many years at Utah State, but before that at Indiana University, and was affiliated with Lynn and Vincent Ostrom at the Workshop in Political Theory and Policy Analysis. Lynn went on to win a Nobel Prize in economics, the first woman to win a Nobel Prize in economics, and to be recognized in that way. And a lot of the stuff I want to talk to you about tonight, a lot of the good comes from the work that they've done in the area of political leadership, and how individuals faced with problems and common dilemmas in society can actually solve those. But it's also important to know that the good is not where we end in politics. We also have great potential for failure, to not be able to decide at all, but also to be able to corruptly decide, or at the very least to be able to decide in a way that is very inefficient for the rest of society. And so I want to explore that with you as well. And frequently when we talk about the idea of political entrepreneurship, we talk about all of these things. And so one of the things that confounds us is sometimes people are talking about things like log rolling or vote trading. How many of you have heard those terms used in about politics? Anyone? Okay, so log rolling or vote trading, that just has to do with when legislators get together and they decide, I'll support your projects for your district if you support my projects for mine. And so we're going to trade a vote. Those votes are going to add up to a majority, and we're going to get then perhaps an omnibus or universal type bill in which we're going to build a lot of little projects that, if we considered them each one on its merits for the nation as a whole, we probably would not have built it. So that post office in your district, that little park that's set up on the side that the congressman comes and cuts the ribbon in front of, those may be wonderful things, but are they the things that we should be spending a lot of tax dollars on? One of the reasons we get those is because of this notion of log rolling and vote trading. So what I want to talk to you about is all these different components so that we can sort out, when we talk about political entrepreneurship, when is that a positive thing that has done some good for us as society, that we're happy that we have leaders that can help us to find the solutions? When is it not so great, and maybe that vote trading and some of the log rolling gets into that, and when is it downright ugly? Just pure corruption, scandal, bundles of money in your freezer at home, whatever. And so I want to talk about each of those in turn. And so I'm being asked to sign on to the College of Charleston. I don't need to do that right now. Not to enroll, but to, okay, I'm going to close that out. Okay, let me back to my talk here. Okay. Okay, so log rolling entrepreneurs. So why would there be this possibility for the need for political entrepreneurs? Well, one of the reasons is we can start to think about, what do we mean by entrepreneur? So what is it that helps us think we need an entrepreneur to help us with that? What do entrepreneurs do? So there are basically two components that whenever you're talking about an entrepreneur in economics, you're going to think about. One, opportunities. So there's something out there that we can discover that where we could be made better off, right? So there has to be that potential. If we are at maximum and there's no potential for an improvement over where we are, then it's going to be very difficult for an entrepreneur in that situation to find anything. What the entrepreneur, however, can often do is where we think we're very well off and we couldn't possibly do any better, they have that potential to see that in fact there is a place we could be made better off, that there are potentials that we have not fully achieved yet. So frequently we look to this entrepreneur in economics to come up with that. So often we talk about Apple and its amazing way of changing the way we think about technology as this very individual friendly now device where we wander around with cell phones and we wander around with computers, and now we're going to wander around with them on our wrist, and soon they'll be embedded somewhere in us and we won't even have to look down at them. We'll just know what's going on. I'm sure it's happening, and I don't know how long it will be. I'll probably be dead, but you never know. In any case, it's being able to see that if you could shrink some of this down, if you could make this, everybody would want one. I was there in those days when we didn't have this. In fact, I was doing experimental economics in the day, and we were doing them on computers before the internet and before there were these personal computers that you could link together and hook up in this way. So we were doing them where when we would have our experiments running, we were doing them in Indiana and Illinois and Texas, and they were all linked through universities in those three communities pre-internet. And when there was a thunderstorm in any of those towns that were hooked up, the whole system went down and we lost our experiment. So I had to sit there with the weather and figure this out. Are we going to have a thunderstorm in Texas tonight, in which case we can't run experiments in Indiana because our computer system will go on? You have no idea how this was. But now we know, and now we have gone. And an entrepreneur was largely responsible for making all of you think, how can we go anywhere without our computers? How can we go anywhere without knowing that? So economic entrepreneurs, we kind of understand. They see opportunities, they take advantage of them, they show us. So what does that translate into in the political arena? Anybody got any ideas? What would that translate into in the political arena? What kind of possibilities could a political entrepreneur do using that kind of notion? An opportunity and a person who can see that opportunity and make that happen. What might that translate into in the political arena? Well, let's think about some of the options. And let's see if I can get to the next page. Okay. As we turn from the economics into the political, even though we're going to be looking for opportunities to advance, in this case, social settings, not individuals, but some level of aggregate action, and they're going to be looking for ideas that others aren't automatically seeing, so a policy entrepreneur or a political entrepreneur. But there are differences when we move into the political arena, and the biggest difference is in the political arena we act socially. So Apple or Xerox or GM or any company that comes up with an idea has to sell it to a set of individuals, but every time they sell it, that family, that person has made that decision individually. In the political arena, it's not enough for you to want something. You also have to be able to convince enough other people who are necessary to take that action in the political arena. So when we shift from the economic entrepreneur to the political entrepreneur, we add a new complex layer that has to do with the idea of social decision making. Now, why is that potentially problematic? Well, one of the reasons is, this is not working as a presentation, this form. Sorry guys, I'm very sorry. It keeps going off of slideshow and I do not know why. Anyway. Okay, one of the reasons is that Kenneth Arrow, has anybody ever heard of Kenneth Arrow? No, okay. Another Nobel Prize, we're going to reach a decision as a group. What's going to happen in that? Anyone guess? Where are they going to go? They each have clear orderings. Where are they going to end up? Anybody? It's a quiet crowd tonight here. Pete? Well, the key to it is, given they have these very consistent over all three, they all can value them, but in that social setting, if they make that decision by majority rule, doing pizza against sandwiches and then sandwiches against Chinese, depending on the order in which they do those, if they choose between pizza and sandwich first, they'll get one outcome. If they choose between sandwich and Chinese first, they'll get a different outcome. And if they choose between Chinese and pizza, they'll get a totally third outcome. Why is that important? Well, what it says is you have three rational, reasonable, well-ordered humans, but when they come together to make a social decision as a group, there is no consistent decision for them. So unlike the market decision that people reach, where you go to the grocery store and you buy a good for yourself and you take it home all by yourself, in the social arena, we have to come together, and it's possible that we may not be able to agree on where we would like to be. And we might have very good reasons for being one place or another, or an argument to be made. So that's one type of political dilemma that makes the political entrepreneur different than the economic entrepreneur. So how would the political entrepreneur work in that setting? Well, they might try and organize the order in which we're going to take that vote. So one thing they might do is, if they know that they like pizza best, they know exactly how to structure it so that pizza is the winner. And they put that in place. And that's what we frequently see in terms of the vote trading and agenda setting power that takes place in Congress. So as we move from the economic arena, where you're voting with your dollars, to the social arena where we have to vote and decide together, then we have this problem that we may not be able to move it across quite so readily. There's a second type of political dilemma that we see that political entrepreneurs can help with, and that is the common dilemma, or the common pool dilemma. Has anybody heard of the tragedy of the commons? Okay, so what's the tragedy of the commons? Who can tell me? Why is it tragic?
Everybody owns it, nobody owns it.
Pardon?
Everybody owns it, and nobody owns it.
Okay, so everybody owns it. So it's a commons. In the olden days, they used to have a common field, and the houses were structured around the field, and all of the farmers used the field to raise their cattle, to graze their animals, to raise crops, whatever they did them in common, and then brought them home. So if you have a common field, what can be tragic about that? If all of you own it and nobody owns it, what would be tragic? So we all kumbaya-ing together here. What's the problem? Well, yeah? Okay, we overuse. So Garrett Hardin coins the term tragedy of the commons, that we would all have an incentive to put extra cattle onto the commons, and in putting extra cattle out onto the commons, over time they would overfeed, and eventually they would destroy the ability of that grassy area to sustain itself and to have grass for the next year, and all of our cattle would die. We see this in resource use after resource use. So the commons is used as an analogy in everything from population to fisheries to oil to whatever resource there might be. If many people can access it and we all value it and want as much as we can, and we know the others may be overusing it and destroying it, we all have an incentive to race to get it as quickly as possible. Do you have any scenarios like that in your world? Does anybody ever try and get there first? Sometimes the dinner table around big families has a bit of that, so everybody digs in and takes everything at the beginning and very quickly and pushes it around. But there are lots of examples of this out there, as I said. If we have to socially organize, Garrett Hardin argued we'd destroy it. So the only solution for Garrett Hardin that he proposed was government must come in and regulate it so that we can't overuse. And much of our environmental policy is done with that logic. That government will know, so they will come in and they will manage Yellowstone. And it will be available for all of us, and the deer will grow plentiful, and the beaver will be destroyed because the deer grow too plentiful, and a variety of other things. But the argument is they would be good stewards of this. Well, what we found over time is not necessarily. It's not that they don't want these wonderful resources to be preserved. It's simply that they may not be able to figure out, and it may be harder for them to do the kinds of things that would preserve them than it is for them not to do those kinds of things. So, one of the things we find with the Yellowstone Commons is on a lot of work done by Charles Kay and others out of PERC. We find results where we love deer, we love elk, they're beautiful, majestic creatures, but they're mean and horrible when it comes to the plants. They tend to eat the trees down and they overpopulate, and if no one gets to come in and hunt them, they will break down ecosystems pretty quickly. So in these places where we sort of fenced it off and tried to make it beautiful for everybody to come and see the delightful deer and the wonderful elk and the beautiful big animals, we frequently led to the destruction of many other animals that weren't quite so cute and fuzzy, lots of other rodents and spiders and ugly icky things, because they don't have good press releases. So they come in and they get destroyed. And so if our purpose was to protect this environment for the use of everyone, the fact that we're doing it in a political arena makes us tell a story that makes certain types of resources easier to save than others. How many of you have heard the comment, "It's for the children," used in a political arena? You are, yes, everybody has heard. You are the, maybe that's, you are the young people still, so it's for the young people, it's for the tomorrow, it's for the whatever. It's for the children, we have to do it for the children. So children are good. If you can get children into your policy problem, it's a lot easier to get attention on that, even if you asked us all of our interests about all of the issues, more spending there would not necessarily be better, even for the children, than spending somewhere else. So extra money on education is frequently pressed as a way of improving lives for children, when in fact a lot of the money that might be spent there today may be wasted. So rather than look at what of the money, where is the money going, and is it being as effectively used as it could be, and are kids learning, we have a tendency to say we should just spend more because it's for the children, rather than what the nature of the problem is. So that's another dilemma that we find. If you can pitch it in that way, you can make the argument in your politics. So that's one set of problems. Another set of problems is the logic of collective action. Has anybody heard of that? Mansur-Olson? Okay, just getting a test of the room here. Okay, Mansur-Olson, who did not win a Nobel Prize. He died too young, really. And I'm sure he would have won a Nobel Prize. It's such an important set of work. Determined that there is a lot more collective action and organizing that could take place in large groups, except for the fact that in a very large group, people tend to think the other person will do it and to free ride on their activity. So let me give you an example of, you're going to create a study group. Has anybody here ever had a study group before an exam or put that together? So is there an optimal size that you think? What do you think the optimal size for your study group is? I mean, I don't know. There is no right answer here, people. So what have you found in your experience as a student in terms of the optimal size? Is there a time when you had too many people in the group? What happens when there are too many people in that group?
Trail off topic.
You trail off topic, so that happens. You get talking about a lot of other things or whatever. What else happens? Say you're going to, okay, this is how you're going to organize it, so you can think about this. There's 10 essay questions that we know could be on the test. We don't know which one there's going to be, and that's a lot. We want really good answers. So if we got 10 people together and everybody did one question, essay answer, and then we all got back together and we shared them and taught each other. We're not cheating. We're teaching each other, and here's where it is in the book, and these are the important books and understanding. You know, we're sharing. That's what teaching's about. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's not cheating. But we're going to do it that way because one person can really focus in on the one and get a very complete thing. We're going to share them. We're going to pass them around with each other. So would that work for you and your group? Do you think that one would work? Why? Why not?
One person could have a different interpretation of information than another person.
Okay, so it might be information issues across the people or skill sets. So if you don't know enough about the other 10 people in this group, you don't know if your interests are aligned. Maybe you really like to do a very complete set on everything. You're a very, very good, careful student, and you want a very complete. And if you were doing all 10 yourself, you would really put a lot into it. Someone else says, I think that he spoke about that on the third day of class, and as I recall, they said something about political entrepreneurs, and that's their contribution. Right? You would probably not be pleased that that was the contribution you got on that answer if you were giving him your very complete outline with citations to the readings and quotes or whatever, right? So one of the challenges is if you have different impressions, different perspective. Any other problems? What happens if someone just doesn't bring theirs at all? They show up. Have you ever been in a study group where I really meant to get it, you know, it's been a week, it's been a hard week, I don't know. But, you know, give me yours and I'm going to get it to you. I'm going to go home right now. I'm gonna get through that last one, and I'll send them to all of you by email later tonight. But give me yours now. Has that ever happened? You guys have better friends than I had, obviously, so. Yeah, it does happen. You got to pick the people right. Well, in politics, you don't always get to pick the right people, and some people may have different motives than you, and may have different abilities than you, and may not actually see these things in the same way, and all of those lead to the potential for you not to get to the solution that you wanted. Now, what kind of mechanism might you use to try and solve that dilemma? The dilemma of the study guide. I gave study guides, and there were 10 essay questions, and every time they made study groups, and every time I heard a story about, well, it was so unfair because, you know, it happened. So what's the solution? what would you tell them? You're going to be a political entrepreneur now here, and you're going to help out this group to form a collective response. Yeah?
Individual performance.
Pardon?
Created group performance and individual.
Okay, so for the faculty, you could say you're going to, so you do group projects. You probably had this in class too, where they put you in groups because teamwork is important in society and you need to work on a team. And there are slackers on teams, shirkers. And so how do you deal with shirkers? Well, you might separate out the grade. You might grade each other. So one of the grade will be the overall performance of the group, which will be the hodgepodge of all of the aggregate of these. So that would be like our political outcome. But you might assign a property right, in essence, of single performance that is based on individuals in the group evaluating the actual performance of each group member. So that could be a score that is generated by people's perception of how much you contributed to the total. Right? So that's one way of solving it. There are lots of ways. This is what political entrepreneurs do. They help us solve collective problems that we have. Frequently, when we think about politics, we think about Congress, the president, the courts. We think about big institutions. But lots of politics takes place not in big institutions, but in smaller interactions between sets of collectivities that share some common purpose. So another good example is an interest group. And that was what the logic of collective action and Mansur Olson's idea was all about. What he said is, if you had a large group who shared a political interest, that free riding would lead to less activity by that group than in fact was efficient for society. So you wouldn't get as much. So the logic he used was, if you had a small group, a privileged group, maybe a business group, where the oil industry might have a great incentive to lobby for special depreciation rules for equipment used in exploring for new oil. And in fact, they do have that interest, and in fact, they have lobbied for that, right? They use their relatively narrow interest that they share in common with each other, and the fact that it is a relatively small group to coordinate across in order to try and achieve it. Why do we let them do that? Why do we, or non-oil industry folks, say, yeah, government, that's a good way to spend our money? Why do all the voters, who probably don't necessarily think that's a great idea to spend extra money on companies that may be making lots of money anyway, and if in a free market would be facing the risk and facing the potential profit themselves? Why would we do that? Why would we not get up and say, I don't think this is right. I don't think we should have extra government spending for depreciation of oil industry research and exploration. I don't see where that's in the interest of America. Yeah.
A bystander effect.
Okay, yeah. So what does that mean? Tell us what the bystander effect means.
The problem is just say, like, oh, that person will do something different.
Okay, so yeah, and that's exactly what Olson said. So now, instead of not contributing to the study guide, we have, well, yeah, that's a big political problem, but it's a political problem for hundreds of millions of people. Certainly someone else with a lot more money and time and energy than I, and maybe better prepared to deal with it, will take care of it. So it's free riding on the actions of others. So that was the core finding of Mansur Olson. But he didn't stop there, and others have not stopped there. So one of the good that comes in political entrepreneurship is the idea that if we can recognize the problem, then maybe we can find a solution. So where Olson said if it was a really big group, nothing would probably get done, the reality is really big groups have been able to do lots of things, even though there was potential for free riding. We had an anniversary of one of those such activities just this last week, the March in Selma. The March in Selma, civil rights movement, the abuses that took place in the civil rights movement against people who rose up and said enough in terms of the discrimination and treatment that African Americans were receiving in the South and in Selma, but in many other states. A group rose up and paid a huge cost personally. Some of them were hurt. Many of them faced economic payments or economic problems associated with it. They lost their jobs. These were very controversial and important things, but they did it. So what is it that had Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement be successful and effective at changing the debate and completely turning around possibilities for whole generations, even though it was a very large group, an entire segment of society, millions of people? How come they were able to achieve it? What was the solution in that context? Any ideas? Well, it was a political entrepreneur, and his name was Martin Luther King. And there were others, Malcolm X. There were others with very different perspectives on how you should go about doing this. But the one that has a holiday and that we revere today is Martin Luther King because of the way in which he did it and paid the ultimate price to do so. Soldiers pay the ultimate price but join up. In fact, the most new soldiers joined among different economic classes in the period following 9/11 and the attacks on in New York and Washington, D.C. than in the entire period before that. And even though the odds of actually having to pay a much higher price had gone up dramatically because it was clear we were going to go to war. So there are leaders that emerge in that. That's the good of the political entrepreneur. The person who can see the possibility, who can lead on that possibility, who can organize around that possibility, who can make it happen, who can solve the collective dilemma. So in your study group, it could be one member of the group. Have you ever had this where there's always someone that takes charge? Okay, we're going to get this done, and they call, did you get yours? And they kind of act as an organizer. That is frequently a good mechanism for getting it done. Making sure, checking on the guys that maybe aren't going to do it, or the woman who never gets her stuff done, or whatever it is. They're checking on them and they're getting it. That is serving as a political entrepreneur. And we consider that to be one of the good features of that, solving those kinds of dilemmas. And the reason is there is no clear solution. But there are solutions. And political entrepreneurs have the potential for directing us towards one of those solutions. If there isn't a political entrepreneur in that context, we're often cycling across those so that we never really resolve. There is nothing that makes pizza better than Subway, better than Chinese. All of those are wonderful or not so wonderful or whatever. But if we need to go somewhere, we could spend all night talking about who's going to do it and never really resolving the right choice. Because there is no right choice in that context. But someone who says, hey, I got the car, we're going to go here, is that okay? Or I really want to have pizza and I'm willing to pay an extra $1 towards the kitty if we can go to have pizza. Someone who can get a different outcome can actually make that happen. Now, there are lots of other political dilemmas that occur. Political parties are a solution to a political dilemma, collective dilemma that occurred. So one of the problems is that cycling that we just saw in the pizza example. Think about it for candidates. Think of if you have 3 candidates running in an election, and 2 of the candidates are sort of Democratic Party type. So one's pretty liberal, think maybe a Barack Obama, and one's a little less liberal, but still a Democrat, a Hillary Clinton. And maybe there's a more conservative one that is, a George Bush type. Okay, so you got 3 candidates there. You kind of see where they are. Which one would you predict will emerge out of those? Well, we know which one really kind of emerged. It wasn't George Bush on the other side, but okay. So one of the ways you do it is political parties. Why? Because if in fact the Democrats have a bigger proportion of the vote, but they're split, they're going to split that vote. It's going to offer an opportunity for that more cohesive Republican candidate to come in, and with the backing of 40% of the voters perhaps, actually win the election, because the other 2 split at 30-30. Just like the pizza and others, there's no decisive outcome in this. If you can order it in different ways, you could get to different places, but they can come in. Political parties say, Hillary and Barack, you can beat each other up till the cows come home during the primary, but come the general election, we're only going to have one of you on the ballot, because that's a mechanism for resolving this more directly. Okay, so there are ways of solving these different institutions, political entrepreneurs, and other mechanisms that we can use, and people can make the case that they have the right answer. Okay, so let's turn, we don't have too much time left, let's turn to the bad. So, if in fact you can manipulate or change or direct people in one place versus another, then one of the problems or challenges is you do it in a way that is pretty horrible. That instead of doing it for the goodness of the group, you do it for your own self-interest, or maybe your self-interest is very bad. Maybe you're an evil person and you're going to take people to a place because you understand how to manipulate the system. You're going to take them to a place they wouldn't otherwise go if they fully understood what was happening. Now, this is sometimes used, we talk about agenda setting and agenda manipulation. So the same leader that could direct us to an outcome where we had a solution, if they're working with these more nefarious approaches, can take us to a position that's good for them, but we as a society may not think is as good for us. And there are ways that that has been baked into the institutions that we have. And some of it's already been referred to here, the fact that we have certain interests that are very strong and small versus very diffuse or dispersed interests of the public at large. So if the oil industry wants to get a special perk, or the ag industry, say you've got dairy farmers, and dairy farmers are good people with nice cows, but at the end of the day they also want to make money, and so they may want dairy subsidies in order to make it easier, more profitable for them to be able to operate their dairy business. Nothing particularly wrong with that. But if we were all asked, do you want to spend an extra 50 cents on a gallon of milk so that the dairy farmers can have, higher prices for their dairy products, we might say, well, that's terrible. The children, what about the children? The children need the milk, right? So you always use the children. Whenever you can, use the children. It's always good. But what about the children? So if you can do that, and I like dairy farmers, but Who's drinking the milk? And you do understand that that actually is a case that happened. In the case of the dairy farmers, they did lobby. So in the school lunch programs that were run by the Department of Agriculture, right, to get rid of extra food from our farmers, we started school lunches. And what would school lunches have? They would have whole milk. Whole milk makes farmers more money than lesser milk, like skim milk or 2% milk. So if you grew up getting whole milk and liking it, because you know it is that fat stuff, so it does kind of taste a little bit better. If you grew up having that, you can thank the dairy farmers of America for lobbying to keep the school people who are supposed to be thinking about the children, after all, having milk that all the nutritionists were telling them was too fat, that we should move the kids to drinking 2% milk because there's too much fat in the whole milk. But we didn't, because of the dairy farmers. So that's one example. Another example is the shoe industry. Take your shoe off and you look. You can take your shoe off if it's not too stinky. I might not fit that bill actually right now. Where's your shoe made? Do you know where your shoes were made? Have you looked at where your shoes are made lately? Most shoes are not made in the United States. There are a few shoes made in the United States now. They're kind of niche markets and they're very specialized and they're very expensive. But it used to be that all shoes were made in the United States. But then we figured out it's a whole lot cheaper and better, and you can have not just one pair of shoes. People used to have one pair of shoes too. Maybe 2 pairs of shoes. Instead, you could have 15 pairs of shoes if you bought shoes made in China, or shoes made in the Philippines, or shoes made somewhere, right? But of course, there were shoe companies in the United States saying we should not be buying shoes made. That's crap. Those are crap shoes. Those are not good shoes like American shoes. Have you ever heard that argument? Okay, yeah, that's true. They are nice shoes in America. I'm not saying they're not great shoes. They're great shoes. But in the 1980s, we tried. Congress, the shoe guys, Brown, you probably don't remember them either because they're no longer around. But they came to Washington and they said, protect our industry, protect our jobs, not unlike the car industry, not unlike many other industries. And guess what happened? They did. And they did. And they did. And they did. And how did they do it? They put extra tariffs, they put extra limits, they put restrictions on how many shoes could be imported, and they subsidized the American shoe industry to make it more competitive. And what ended up happening? At the end of about a 10-year period, this campaign of trying to save the shoe industry, the American shoe industry at the end of that 10-year period was virtually gone. It went anyway. They could not stop the market from moving. But in the meantime, they had dumped enough money into that industry that it had cost for every single job they tried to save $200,000. Now you have to remember that's in the early 80s. $200,000 back then was real money. If you had gone to any of those people in the shoe industry that were workers there and said, here's $50,000, they would have been dancing their way into community college or somewhere else. They would have had a happy time. They would have gone and bought a 7-Eleven franchise. They would have found extra things to do. And in fact, eventually that's exactly what ended up happening, but not until the American government and you as taxpayers and your parents as taxpayers had paid a lot to keep it from happening. That's money. That's rent seeking that the shoe industry pursued that then ended up going down the drain. It didn't change the outcome, but it was a lot of wasted money to try to change that outcome, because the market outcome could not be changed. And so that's another example. So when we talk about the bad, this coordination, this access, this focusing people on interests, all of that has the potential to lead to inefficiency and waste in an effort to try to help or do good for one. And it can happen because you probably had no idea that every pair of shoes cost 50 cents more because of these rules, or that your taxes went up a penny for every American in order to pay out those kinds of payments. A penny? I don't care about a penny. I'm going to send my lobbyists to Washington to keep them from spending my penny. No. But $200,000 per job we're trying to save, now we're talking real money. So the fact that certain concentrated groups means they have a bigger stake in it and they will work harder, and in a democratic system where the rest of us are pretty clueless about what's going on most of the time on this front, it's very easy to manipulate that. And then we have the ugly. And the ugly is the next iteration, and that is the corruption. You take this to a point. Now, the shoe industry did nothing wrong. They just argued their case to congressmen that we would lose jobs in your district. How many of you have heard a congressperson in a campaign say, I'm trying to protect American jobs. I'm trying to protect, this company is going overseas, our guys are losing theirs, the unions can't, whatever. That happens day in, day out in a political campaign. It's a perfectly legitimate argument. What's not so legitimate is if I pay you this amount of money and you take it home and put it in your freezer, then you pass this bill for me. So that's where it gets ugly, where it goes across the line of using the system to now being about corruption and scandal. Now, bribery, efforts to, I will take you on a trip somewhere nice and lavish your family. I will hire your wife in this cushy $1 million lobbyist job for us because she is such a beautiful and articulate spokesperson for our industry. I just can't believe we didn't discover her till now. You know, you've seen it. I mean, they're never going to say, if I hire your wife, will you do this for me? But if they're giving your family $500,000 because your wife happens to be the most incredible person to do this job, then isn't that coming close to the corruption, the scandal that in fact has led to certain candidates and certain lobbyists being brought down, arrested, run out of town on a rail. Now, in the US, those are fairly rare because they have so much space in the bad category that they almost never have to go into the truly ugly category. Only an idiot in Washington gets ugly because bad is so lucrative. So why would you turn to ugly and the threat of getting arrested? But in other countries, that's not the case. In other countries, the whole way they do business is in that mechanism of the ugly, where corruption is the way in which you do these kinds of activities, where bribery is the only way you ever get a permit to start your business, or bribery is the only way that your candidate can get onto the ballot and even have a chance of being heard. So there are countries, and lots of them, where there is no sense of the rule of law with regard to these political decision processes. And when that happens, then the ugly becomes the mechanism. And it is very hard to get around that because those kinds of benefits often use government to protect those who have been benefiting from it at the expense of the average person. So if you have this power and authority and there is no legitimate system of rule of law, then there's no one to counter those with power. In the United States, we know of these scandals because there is, every so often, someone rises up and says, I think this has crossed over the line. We're going to put a prosecutor in place. We're going to investigate this more thoroughly. And because we have those legal mechanisms to do it, it's possible. But in many other countries, that's not even possible. And so with that, I'm going to stop, and we'll see if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, just a few minutes for questions if anybody has any.
So why don't we just elect people who don't do bad stuff?
Oh yeah, I think that's a great solution, and they can do it for the children. That actually, we often don't know who the good people are, and one of the challenges in especially the bad category is if I'm protecting the shoe industry in my district, is that bad? Certainly the corrupt ones, yes. But in the bad rent-seeking category, I'm fighting for jobs in my district. I'm fighting for the farmer. And you know a dairy farmer can't live if he can't feed his family, and we're losing. Do you want to have to drink milk that comes from some foreign country where you don't know where they're putting, what they're putting into it? I think the argument gets to be really tough that you can couch these in very legitimate settings. The other piece of it is we often do think they, sorry, touch that. We often do think they are good. That we think that they, their images are good. And so we don't have the information about these kinds of things, nor can you even find it. I study the American, the Affordable Care Act and the healthcare industry, and I can't tell you how hard it was to have a clue what was in the Affordable Care Act within a year of its passage. People tried to read it. It's very hard to read. It's thousands of pages long, and the interpretation of it, the regulatory interpretation to start to implement it, is now, I think, about 16 feet tall in terms of the stack of paper. It is an incredible lot of decisions that go into something like that. So if I am a health insurer, or I am the American Medical Association, or I am the lobbyist for the American Hospital Association, I have a lot of interest in finding out what's in it and what's in it for me and what's it going to do to me. But if I'm, Joe on the street, I can't even read it. And when they say 2,500 pages of a policy, that's not like 2,500 pages of a textbook. The lines will be in paragraph 3 of subsection 2 of the code in such and such part. Strike 4 and insert this line. That's how it's written. And so then you have to go from there to subsection 3 and that. So it's not written in whole. It's not written in narrative. Very, very hard. And so the lobbyists have a real advantage because they can use their knowledge of how to read legislation and what to look for to know whose ox is being gored and where they are on that. And I don't. I mean, I do because I kind of find it fascinating, but most average normal humans don't. Anything else? Yeah.
So, are there actually any purely good?
Of course. Of course.
That can appeal to everyone? That's what.
No, I don't think that appeal to everyone. I think it would be almost impossible. We come really close to consensus 9/11, post 9/11, George Bush, off the charts, right? People forget that, that he was just off the charts. Highest popularity, because so soon after we start to drag them down and pick on them. Even when we have those great consensus moments, there are always critics and there are always people who disagree, and a lot of times, even if people are saying, oh yes, we all agree, they're looking for, well, what's it going to mean for us? So think about the healthcare legislation. Everybody says, well, we care about the health of Americans and we're trying to have access for everybody. That's what we really care about. But what they're also really caring about is we have access for everybody is, But am I going to get paid as a doctor to see all these new people? Is this new demand for my system? Does this mean I'm going to get more regulation that I'm going to have to answer to? I'm thinking of the broad one. I'm saying the good things in public, but in the back room, my lobbyists and my legal staff are looking for what does this really mean for us? And how is that going to impact our industry? And will we survive that type of way? So honestly, try and think of anything that we would all agree with. So I do some moral dilemmas with my class. I'm going to give you an example to show you that that's the case. Okay, so this one's a good one. Okay, you can save one. There's a big flood coming, and there's two things that are out there that you could only save one. You're not going to have time to get to both. The floodwaters are coming too quickly. So one is a child and one is an adult. Who should you save? Say child. Does everybody say the child? Okay, so you're getting onto it. Okay, so I got another one. A dog or a person? Okay. Your dog or a stranger?
That's hard.
Well, already, I mean, it was easy, the one before, but already we put a wrinkle in there. Okay, stranger, your dog, your faithful dog has always been there for you through everything. See, already you don't know. What most would other people say still, the stranger? Or would you go for your dog? I should not use dogs. I should use cats. People don't feel as serious about their cats. Okay, her cat she'd go for. Say, we got cat people too. Good, okay. Okay, but I got the next one. So, if you said stranger, because, it's a human, and could you leave a human to drown while you saved your dog? And that's not going to look good on the news, I can tell you that right now. And certainly if you're a politician, that's not going to look good on the news. And think about how they think about these things. Okay, so now, the stranger, now you know who it is. Hitler. And Lassie, the best dog ever. Lassie and Hitler. Now who? So you might change your mind in that case, because saving Hitler would not be a good thing, right? Because we could have saved a lot of hassle and lost life if we'd gotten rid of Hitler in a flood. See, so by the way you pitch it, by the way you think about it, you can change these things and make even what should be kind of straightforward harder to decide. And those are easy compared to the real political issues. And why I make my class do those in my exercises is, okay, so, well, we're never going to have to do that. That's not the kind of dilemma we face. It's not Lassie or Hitler. What about health care? Do we cover that? Do we do organ transplants at hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars because we can? You start to get into real policy issues and it gets to be harder. And what if that raises the cost of health insurance $1,000 for everybody to offer these kind of exceptional that may not work very well but are the only shot that they have? Should we do experimental treatments like that if it meant everybody's going to pay $1,000 more for their health insurance? And is society better? So again, when you get into these political, it's not very hard to find ways that a crafty political entrepreneur can craft the message to make people see it differently. So in the healthcare debate, the uninsured in America are largely between 20 and 30 and healthy. They don't have much money because they're between 20 and 30 and they're just starting their careers. And health insurance is fairly expensive and they don't value it very much because they don't use it. So they're making a pretty good economic decision for them, right? So the whole healthcare law was passed in an effort to try and get that group covered. They eventually get covered when they have need or develop it or want it, they got covered. That was all designed for that. But that's not the story you heard. You heard the story of the young mother who had cancer and was going to die in the absence of treatment, and her children would be left with no one. That's the story, right? Because that's compelling. That's a good story. And the story about, you know, the 25-year-old who doesn't want to pay $100 a month because it's expensive, and, you know, that's... In Utah, when we were doing health policy, it was called Joe's Six-Pack. And if the cost of insurance was more than a six-pack of beer a week, they wouldn't buy it. Honest to God. Six-pack a week, that's how much. You could get the price under a six-pack, and in Utah, a six-pack wasn't that cheap, but still, that's not very much, and you could never get it under that. But if they had to pay out of pocket, even if their employer were paying the bulk of it, if their out of pocket to pay that premium was more than one six-pack a week, they weren't taking it. So, you know, now they have to, and we'll use mandates and force and the IRS and a lot of other things to try and get them to not have that six-pack and to pay. Only now, they didn't value it then, but now under the new law, their price has pretty much doubled in real terms. They get subsidies, so it may not seem like it. But in real terms, it's doubled. And it's doubled because in the old days, before the Affordable Care Act, I paid 7 times as an old person. I paid 7 times as much as a young person. That's how much the variation was and how much they could price it. Now, the law mandates I pay no more than 3 times what you pay. Which means, if mine comes down, because I'm in the age that would use more, yours has to go up to help cross-subsidize mine. So the same group that didn't value it before now is going to face higher costs once they earn enough to not have subsidies. Anyway, so it's really hard. It's really hard to
We
find
got
those.
time for maybe one more question. If there's one more.
Yeah.
So, as far as like businesses, you know, candidates run for office or campaign management teams, are they actually out there searching for, you know, like political entrepreneurs?
Oh yeah. It's huge business, and it didn't exist before.
What is the criteria they use for that? Because most of the articles I've read pertaining to like the psychology of an entrepreneur, there's no really working, you know, definition to it.
Right. Well, often a political entrepreneur, now this is the difference between the good and the bad political entrepreneur. The good entrepreneur, I would argue, comes from the ground up. So they come from a movement, they come from a group, and they're so committed to it, they'll work hard for it. Think Mothers Against Drunk Driving. That was one mother who said, enough. This shall not happen again on my watch. I have to do what I have to do to stop it. And that one mother got other mothers who'd faced that same horrid tragedy to say, let's try and stop kids drinking and driving and dying too young. So that whole movement, that's hard. It's hard to start a political movement as a real person without an industry to help fund you, etc. But it does happen. Martin Luther King, enough. You get a political leader like that, that's the good kind. The bad kind are almost always people who came out of the political system. So they're old politicos. They're either an ex-congressman, an ex-governor, an ex-something, an ex-president. That's getting, I mean, one of the problems for Hillary Clinton right now is she's married to an ex-president, and as an ex-president, you are very popular with lots of people, including other countries, etc., and they will pay you hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars to come speak to them. But getting the Saudi Arabia government to pay you $1 million to come speak to them doesn't look good when your wife is running for president. So it, you know, it gets into problems. So it's often old politicos or staffers. So the politicos we can kind of identify and keep an eye on them, but what we don't keep an eye on, what's harder, much harder to do, is the chief of staff of that congressperson or the chief legislative assistant on health care. Who in the heck knows who that was, but they worked 20 years for Congressman so-and-so and they know every single word in all these legislation. That person now goes to the lobbying firm and they know just where to go. When I told my students here, I heard this afternoon in the talk they gave them, here's how you make money. Ben Rast was telling people here's how you make some money, so I'm going to give you mine. If you really want to make money, here's what you do. You go to Washington and you're a top staffer, you get your law degree, okay, you got to get a law degree, sorry, and then you go to Washington, or you get it while you're there, you can work as a staffer and get your law degree, and then you work on the tax committees, Ways and Means in the House or Senate Finance. Nobody knows how to read taxes. I mean, there's like mind-boggling numbness comes over you. So it's horribly boring, it's very dense, nobody knows what's in there. You work 10 years, 5 years. You don't have to work very long on tax policy if they're making any of it. And no one else knows what's in it, but you know because you helped write it, because it's staffers that write this stuff and get it passed. And you know this is worth gazillion dollars to that industry. Because we just put a loophole you could drive your Mercedes-Benz through, you know? So you know that. So you do your stint, you make your good, you're a good government servant, you do all the good, and then you set up your tax law lobbying practice, and you sell your expertise to all the people who are now trying to use the things. It's only good for so long, because you know they'll make new policy and then your stuff may go away at some point. So you have to use it as much as you can until it, but it's extraordinarily lucrative. Nobody makes more than informed tax attorneys. Because it's bazillions, it's rent seeking. They get $40 million. And who's losing it? The IRS. Well, we hate them, so no loss there, right? So that's the beauty of it. You know, anyway, that's my tip for how to make a lot of money. Tax attorney. Okay, well, they have to be allowed to leave. You can go. I mean,